I'm JP Tuesday.
And I'm Kiki Cannon. As lifelong Disney fans, the work of countless talented Disney creatives have shaped our lives.
Now, as the Disney catalog expands, we're taking a journey through film and television to discover if that spark that shaped us as children lives on in adulthood.
Does your favorite Disney media still cast that same spell? Join us as we find out. We are Rewatching the Magic.
Commander Cannon to the bridge.
Yeah, sure. Can I bring a drink? I've got a drink. I mean, I can seal it if you want.
No, you're good. We're pretty lax here.
Oh, okay. All right. Cool.
Yeah. We are not alone this week. Once again, coming on to the bridge, our good friend Adam Liebreich-Johnsen.
Hi, I just got back from my Gelosia and I feel 10 pounds lighter.
Gelosia!
Gelosia!
I hope everybody Gelosia'd before we got into the vehicle. We are not stopping.
Okay, so before we get into any of that, we have a brand new Thor trailer that came out just a few hours before we recorded. And yeah, this one's telling us a lot more about what this movie's going to be about than the first trailer did. First thing I want to talk about, Thor has a Loki tattoo.
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah, that one part where
I also missed that. How did I miss that?
When Zeus flicks and all of Thor's clothes come off, there is a Loki tattoo. His back has the Loki crown on it. He has a tattoo of his dead brother.
That's very sweet.
That's nice that Thor has that on his bio. He has his brother with him.
Oh my God, that is a tattoo, isn't it?
About half his back is his Loki tattoo.
I think I was more focused on the pixelation, so yeah, I was.
You were looking at the full Hemsworth, aren't you?
Well, I was eating grapes at the time, so.
I'm assuming in the actual theater that's not going to be pixelated, probably.
I mean, we had Hulk's CGI bare buttocks in Ragnarok. I wouldn't doubt that we would see the full Hemsworth in this movie.
At least from the back end.
Yes.
So I've myself have dubbed this movie Thor by Panic and Thunder.
I don't think we're panicking. I'm not panicking. Who's panicking?
But yeah, everyone in this movie is very hot.
Well, it's Taika's world, and we're all just.
And yes, I'm including Korg in that assessment.
Yeah, Korg was super into it. I don't know. That was my favorite part of that scene, with Korg leaning in like, I could use a better view.
All we need is like the opera lenses.
Yeah. The girls are just sharing grapes, and Korg is like, anybody else wanting a better seat for this?
The fact that the Greek gods were fainting at the sight of Thor's other hammer. Yeah.
Is that one called Mjolnir as well?
I wouldn't doubt if it was. This does give, even though we kind of had the confirmation in Endgame, this does give some confirmation that Jane was blipped. Because she even says, what's it been, like 4 years? It's been 8 years, but yeah.
Well, she's also way more over it than Thor is.
It's interesting that how not over it Thor is, considering part of what we've seen in the trailer is Thor with other people.
I think it's one of those things is that he saw her again for the first time in 8 years, and then all of those old feelings came back. Like, out of sight, out of mind kind of deal.
Well, there's feelings coming back, and there's knowing exactly how much time has passed. Which, for someone with that lifespan, let's just say, some of the more interesting things to me, though, kind of jokes aside, is I really love the design of Gore.
Gore the God Butcher, yeah. Reminds me a lot of Quan Chi from Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, there is a bit of that. Bale pulls it off. I mean, he's always been good at playing a villain.
We have another former Batman playing a Marvel villain.
I think the DC people always fare better coming over to Marvel than the other way around. You know, some of the things that we get, you know, the line about you're different than the others I've come across because you actually have something to fight for is a pretty interesting line.
There's that one clip where we see Gore holding someone in his arms. I assume that would be his wife or some other loved one to him. Probably is the catalyst for him going all gods must die. Because his whole thing is that he has prayed to gods his whole life and they have forsaken him, and now he's just done with it.
Taika has made a statement about how interesting it's going to be for Thor to have the love of his life show up dressed like him, and I thought, so he is his brother. So I also thought it was interesting because we get to see a little bit more of the costuming, and I thought it was funny that Thor is the one with the boob armor.
I mean, have you seen his pecs?
But I think it's really funny that they try to do like femme Thor armor, which they've done in the comics, you know, because I mean that idea of Jane becoming Thor, you know, taken from the comics as we've discussed, but hers is kind of just, it's molded, but it's not like two separate boob plates, you know, which I loathe because that'll get you killed in a battle real quick.
Yes, it's just a funnel directly to your sternum.
Yeah, you want to take a blow that will crush your sternum immediately into your internal organs. Try doing molded boob plate. But ironically, that's what they've given Thor. So, you know, have fun with your crushed sternum there, which I thought was hilarious.
I will admit I'm not super familiar with where is it the Greek pantheon that there is that Olympus where they are? I'm not familiar how that fits into the Marvel universe, so that I'm looking forward to seeing how that works out.
I mean, Greek gods have shown up in Marvel. Hercules has been a regular ally to Thor in the comics, so that's what I'm looking forward to. I know we're seeing Zeus. I'm wondering if we are going to see Hercules in this movie.
I'm loving the armor design for King Valkyrie. Can we?
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good.
I'll take some of that.
It's so good. That's I'm just loving that costume. Every costume that they put her in is just such a mood. But
I kind of like this one over the white armor she had in the previous movies.
Yeah. And that suit, I mean, we talked about that in the teaser, but that's, you know.
Yeah.
And I love story time with Korg.
Yeah.
I hope that they do, like, recap things.
I mean, what if this entire movie is just narrated by Korg?
I would love that, but I also just want, like, you know, YouTube videos leading up to the film, you know?
Korg recaps everything of Thor up to this point.
Yeah.
Would you want Korg or Luis doing that?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm with Adam. Yes.
I just both of them, like, and you know,
on a couch. Yeah.
Deadpool can come too.
Yeah. It is so weirdly interesting people's reaction to this trailer, because I've seen a lot of people just being like, oh man, you know, that one, you know, that's doing Ragnarok, just that, you know, that one off was kind of, it was fun, but this is gonna be the whole tone now. This isn't my Thor. And I was like, you know what, screw that, this is my Thor. The Thor movies were always funny. I mean, even the first Thor was really hilarious.
I will never forget the laugh out loud moment I had when Jane backed the truck into him as he was coming out of the hospital.
Yeah, it's like
well, where are we going to find him? Smack.
I don't mean to keep hitting you with my car, I swear. Like, it's like, this is the best meet cute ever. Just keeps hitting a dude with a car.
I mean, would they prefer Thor from the comics just spewing pseudo Shakespearean English and being pompous?
I mean, that was kind of the tone of the first film, except it understood how kind of ridiculous that was. Because Stan always understood how kind of ridiculous that was. That was kind of the point of Thor. And Stan knew that. I mean, we talked about that when we talked about Thor. Stan always said Thor was his way of being weirdly pseudo-Shakespearean and philosophical while understanding that he didn't know anything about either Shakespeare or philosophy. And I was like, he kind of understood that.
Or Norse gods, for that matter.
Or Norse gods, for that matter, because wow, does it not get any of that right.
And Kenneth Branagh understood that, and he made a great movie from that.
Yeah, because if anybody is open to absolutely taking the piss out of themselves, it's Kenneth Branagh. So, I mean, he's always...
Gilderoy Lockhart.
Well, yeah, I mean, he was kind of a really good choice for that. Yeah, because he's capable of all that. And he's always been a really good choice for Shakespearean comedy because he's always understood that Shakespeare didn't take himself seriously either. You know, it's like... So that's why that first movie worked. And people, in the same way they misunderstand Shakespeare, have kind of started looking back on the first one going like, that was serious drama, my dudes. No, it wasn't. But this is perfectly fine in the evolution of these films and for the character. So I don't know what anybody's talking about. This looks amazing, and I cannot wait to see it.
Me neither. July can't get close enough, because, yeah. All right, it's time. All right, let's move on to Star Trek, but not Star Trek.
Seth Trek.
Seth Trek. What do you do when you really, really want to make Star Trek The Next Generation, but don't have the rights to Star Trek The Next Generation? You make your own Star Trek The Next Generation with blackjack and yeah.
And gelatinous beings.
Yeah.
I mean, there used to be a time where it seemed like every couple of months we were hearing Seth MacFarlane wants to reboot blank. Remember when that came out that he wanted to reboot the Flintstones?
Well, I mean, he already did that. It's called Family Guy.
I mean, legit Flintstone, as in called the Flintstones. But, you know, him wanting to do his own version of Star Trek would have fit in that vibe at the time. And he did. We have the Orville. When it came out, there were a lot, because it came out at the same time that Star Trek Discovery did. And there were a lot of people who did not like what Discovery was doing during those first few episodes and saw the Orville and saying, this is what Star Trek should be. You know, Seth is getting, you know, the guy known for making Family Guy is making a better Star Trek than the guys who are making Star Trek.
And see, I am not one of those types. I know that's an unpopular opinion, but I've been really loving all the new Star Trek series, but I also love the Orville just as much. And I don't think it has to be an either or thing. I think it can all be good if you like it all.
I'm somewhere in the middle on that because I've never been able to get into Discovery or some of the other of the new Star Trek shows. I've given them all a shot. Most of them have not gotten to me. I've watched all of Picard and mostly liked it. Season 2 was a bit hit or miss for me. Really loving Strange New Worlds.
And there's room for ever. There's so much new Star Trek that it doesn't matter if you don't like one or another, because there's another one that you might like.
Yeah, I'm willing to let everybody like what they like. As far as the thing, I was just trying to say, like, I am one of the people who was not as drawn in by the new Star Trek shows. You were very much drawn in by the new Star Trek shows. Tuesday, I don't think that you really have watched much of the new.
I've not watched all of them, mostly because I don't have cable, and I really cannot afford to put down any money for Paramount Plus at the current time.
Yeah, which is fair. I mean, too many streaming services at the moment.
I've only got it now because I have it for a year free with my cell phone plan. So
yeah, Orville, I think, was more of a. I like sci-fi. I really like Seth MacFarlane, which is a hit or miss for a lot of people. That's another thing that's a very love or hate relationship for a lot of people.
Like, I am not a huge Family Guy fan myself, or American Dad, or really pretty much anything else Seth MacFarlane has done. Like, I recognize the talent. It's just not really for me.
I, on the other hand, very much, I liked Family Guy at the beginning. I stayed with it in all the reruns through the years that it was just on all the time on Adult Swim. Stayed with it when it came back. Still watch it now. I do like American Dad. Will still watch American Dad. He's also got all the music albums out that he does,
Yeah, you have expressed your appreciation for Seth's singing voice over the years.
Yeah, well, I mean, I own his Christmas album, and we all know how I feel about Christmas. Like, that stuff is on my phone, and I will listen to it. I might even listen to it in a month that does not have a Christmas. So yeah, no. I mean, it's a thing.
Like, I'm really surprised they haven't had him sing really on the Orville yet.
There's been opportunities for him to sing. But, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because they've gone more for Scott Grimes singing.
Yeah.
Who can also sing really well.
Oh yeah. It's more of a if you walked up to me and were like, "Hey, Kiki, would you be interested in like Star Trek, but it's also done by Seth MacFarlane?" I mean, how much do you have to reach into a grab bag of things and pull out things that appeal to the very narrow niche of things I would be into, So I think this was always going to be my thing.
Yeah, probably. And I when it was coming out, I kept reading about how he was really inspired by specifically Star Trek: The Next Generation, which is still my favorite Star Trek series.
And you can see it in the main cast specifically. The archetypes that they're using for these characters, and we'll get into it.
Yeah, but yeah, and then I get that same feeling watching the Orville that I get watching Next Generation. It's like unabashedly hopeful. It's sweeping. It's enormous. Like it's everything that I've got from Next Generation, but like with some modern sensibility and humor thrown in.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people were down on it in the beginning were down on it because of the humor. Like, oh, it's Star Trek, but if they tried to put humor in it, I'm like, what Star Trek were you people watching? Because Star Trek always had humor.
I think those are for a lot of people. They're going to the Abrams Trek because a lot of people that was their first exposure to it, and that's what they're comparing it to. That's the best I can think of.
But I mean, this was specifically a throwback to the original series and Next Generation, which always had humor. As did even the darker shows in the original run, like Deep Space Nine and Voyager, were still funny.
I think like you would get a person who would like the hardcore Star Wars fans. They'll look back at the original trilogy and say how serious it was. This was, drama, and completely forgetting all of the silly parts into it, and saying, "Oh no, that all the silly parts came with the prequels and the sequels. That was never in my original trilogy." Looking back at the original trilogy, like in the same direction, like they take the material so seriously that they just block out all the comedic moments that are in that original trilogy. Like they would block out the comedic moments of the original Star Trek, Next Generation, etc., because in their mind that's what they formed it to be.
Yeah, but then you have an episode like The Trouble with Tribbles, which was clearly just a comedy episode.
And even the serious episodes have jokes all throughout. I mean, it's constantly, the original series is constantly Bones making jokes at Spock's expense, or Chekhov talking about what random thing was invented in Russia this week, or, it's...
Original Star Trek's comedy influenced Lost in Space. Lost in Space was completely serious, and they were losing the ratings war to Star Trek, so they had to go a bit more comedic in the second season onwards. That shows you how much the comedic power that original Trek had at the time.
And I think some of that criticism of early Orville has a little bit of merit to it, because I think it took them a little while to find the right balance of the humor to the rest of the story. But I think they got there after the first few episodes.
Yeah. I think you might be right in the fact that the first few episodes they lean a little too into this is the Seth MacFarlane space show,
like the whole anti-banana ray sequence, which is hilarious, but also a little out of place in that scene.
Yeah, it does feel like they're being slightly unprofessional in their mocking of the anti-banana ray, but it's still got some of my favorite lines. We need no longer fear the banana. It's interesting in that sense that people, I think just a lot of people were automatically
they were assuming it was going to be Family Guy in space.
Yeah.
I was thinking that, yeah.
But also I think it took a little while for people to realize you can have a comedy drama mix and have it work. Because they were used to, especially with sci-fi, is it comedy sci-fi or is it drama sci-fi? Is this the prestige sci-fi show or is it the goofy sci-fi show? Like, well, can it not be a little bit of both? Is
it The Expanse or is it Red Dwarf?
Yeah. And I'm like, well, can't it have, can't it be, a Ouroboros Red Dwarf where it's funny, but also it's like tear-jerking because you get the reveal of where Lister comes from and you want to cry a little bit, I don't know. I like that mix, but you can tell when you watch this show, and I think this is one of my favorite things about it. The people making it, specifically Seth, this is so much like, I'm going to be a geek about all the stuff I love and you're not going to stop me, which I kind of respect.
And it goes beyond the Star Trek stuff, especially with the 20th century references throughout the series. The music that's used, the film clips that are used.
Well, and I find the use of pop music and all that kind of stuff very refreshing, and I think it's a great counter to Star Trek always using classical music as what people listen to for recreation in the 24th century for some reason.
I mean,
Picard is very into, the quote-unquote highbrow classical music to show that he's educated and stuff. And I'm thinking,
like every week there's a string quartet recital on the Enterprise.
Yeah. But we think of that as the highbrow educated thing because it's like, well, you know something that's from 400 years ago. Well, yeah, but move that 400 years into our future. What would they be considered the highbrow classical educated thing?
Dolly Parton.
He's gonna know Dolly Parton and Billy Joel and Broadway musicals and stuff because it's from our current time, which is now going to be 400 years in his past.
And Dolly Parton is used in one of my favorite sequences in the whole series, which I won't discuss now because it's a bit spoilery.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that later. But that's what would be their classical literature because, move it ahead in time.
But that's kind of why I found the complaints about the Beastie Boys being in the Abrams Star Trek movies a little disingenuous. Because, why wouldn't they also listen to the Beastie Boys in addition to everything else?
Why wouldn't people 500 years from now look at music from the 90s and not see it as classical music?
Yeah. And we consider that oh, ha, ha, ha. But wouldn't it? If you go back 400 years and tell somebody then that a contemporary composer is well, this is what children study in school as the height of,
Even if you go back and tell someone, oh yeah, kids are going to study Shakespeare in school, and they're going to turn around as you think, that jackass?
Yeah, the guy who writes the dick and fart jokes? That guy? Yeah, no, they absolutely would not believe you.
Which makes me wonder, 500 years from now, will they look back at Seth MacFarlane the same way?
I mean, we don't know, because we don't know what will survive.
Yeah.
Which is always the thing. So it is very possible that things we look at now and we go oh, that's garbage for the masses. Well, yeah, but sometimes it becomes for the masses for a reason,
And then you'll have Commander Kelly Grayson singing them at karaoke aboard a starship.
Exactly. It's interesting to have it put in that context, and I like that this show doesn't use it as a punchline in a lot of ways. Star Trek always used it as remember the greats. It's Albert Einstein and so of Vulcan, and it's always just people we would recognize and then third alien name, But we have really cool things like the Kermit the Frog through line.
Yeah, MacFarlane.
Which I love.
Yeah,
I love that Ed describes him as a great leader.
I mean, when you have to wrangle frogs and berries and chickens and things, you better be a good leader.
But that is the entire point of the Muppet movie, which we've talked about, is that Kermit discovers that he didn't intend to be a leader, but he is one. And that is also the point of the character arc of Mercer. Mercer brings on board this Kermit the Frog toy to kind of remind him of leadership.
Now,
but he follows a similar path, without getting too spoilery. He is the guy who doesn't really believe in himself or intend to make a found family, and he ends up doing that anyway.
Yeah, and keep in mind that this was before Disney bought 20th Century Fox.
Yeah, it's just Seth MacFarlane really likes Muppets.
Yeah.
So
they had to license Kermit the Frog for that, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah, because, we haven't really mentioned it, but this is one of those those things that got bought. It was not originally a Disney show, and then as so many things happen, one day they all woke up and realized they were working for Disney. But the third season, which comes out right after this episode goes up, will be the first released under Disney.
And in some countries will be on Disney Plus.
Yeah, in America it will be on Hulu, which is owned by Disney, but in other
owned by Disney.
Huh?
Majority owned by Disney. They don't 100% own it.
Well, yeah, it's part of the buyout merger thing. So it will air on Disney Plus in a lot of the rest of the world.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
Hey, this is Tuesday editing the episode. At this point, Adam's microphone started having some problems and he had to switch out. Unfortunately, he had only had a lower quality mic available to him at the time, so there's going to be some weird noises coming from his end for the rest of this episode, and we apologize for it. But hopefully that does not ruin your listening experience with the rest of this episode. Thank you.
Now, back to our show.
Let's just talk about the premise real quick, if there's anybody that hasn't seen it and wants to be talked into it. We do have the idea that, within the first couple of minutes, we get the kind of sitcom-y opening, I guess, of Starship Captain Ed Mercer coming home to his wife Kelly, except he finds her in bed with a weird blue alien. It's Rob Lowe in a wonderful cameo that comes back later in the series. That leads to a divorce that kind of derails Ed's career until he is given command of the Orville. It's not really the most prestigious ship, but it could get his career back on track. The only problem is that it's in need of a first officer, and the only available first officer is, his ex-wife Kelly. Hilarity ensues.
Other than that, it's your typical Star Trek premise of ship going around the galaxy, searching out new worlds and new civilizations. Boldly go, blah-de-blah-de-blah.
But with a kind of ragtag misfit crew.
Yeah, you have a various alien species on board, as well as your human characters. And a lot of them are, not the best. Some of them are rather unconventional kind of characters. People that may not make it onto the high-class starships. So they're here.
Yeah, the helmsman is specifically there because he's Ed's best friend.
He also happens to be one of the best pilots in the fleet, but he's also a bit of a screw-up.
Yeah, he's never really applied himself. He's excellent at his job, but he's kind of lazy and, rather laid back. He had been stuck on desk duty because he tried to impress a date with a rather dangerous piloting maneuver and kind of screwed that up. That one is played by Scott Grimes, who, if you watch Seth MacFarlane's other work, is on American Dad.
Speaking of characters that are kind of unconventional, you have, for the first season at least, security officer Alara Katan, who, while one of the shortest members of the crew, is incredibly strong because of her alien heritage. Her planet is very dense in gravity, which, because she has lived on it her whole life, in normal Earth-type gravity, she is very strong. By own admittance, she's only on the ship because of that. And that's part of her story arc as well, is that she feels she hasn't earned her position through her work, but rather, for lack of a better term, alien affirmative action. And she's played by Halston Sage, who does an amazing role in this.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because the Zelayan people, her alien race, they are mostly scientists or artists. Scholars,
yeah.
They look down on any sort of military service, so it's very rare for anyone from her species to be there because they are not really interested in joining up with the Union fleet. We get our doctor, Dr. Claire Finn, who is on the show because she was on Deep Space Nine. You will remember Penny Johnson-Gerald if you watched Deep Space Nine because she was Cassidy Yates, also known as the eventual wife of Benjamin Sisko.
She was also on that cop show that Nathan Fillion, Castle.
Oh yeah, she did.
She was the captain of the precinct there.
Eventually, yeah. But she is only on the ship because she wants to go where she is needed. So she specifically requests the Orville because she thinks they need her.
Because of Mercer's reputation.
Yeah. We get Lieutenant Lamar, who, much like Gordon Malloy, he's very laid back and kind of a screw up. And then we very quickly discover that he's sort of a genius, but he hides it because he didn't want to be an outcast.
One of my favorite things from the pilot is how quickly Gordon and John just become best friends.
Yeah, they're very much two peas in a pod, and then you find out later that no, John is very intelligent and very quick to pick things up, but
Gordon
he
really
hides
is
it.
an idiot.
Yeah, Gordon on the other hand is very much an actual idiot, but also the best pilot ever. And then we get Bortus, who is from the Moclan species, who are a single gender species, or are they? Dun dun dun.
Very serious, very warrioristic, very. He's Klingonish.
Yeah.
They're kind of like cross between Klingons and Vulcans.
Yeah, it's very logical, but also very warlike.
Yeah.
Very self-serious.
Yeah. Don't understand humor, that kind of thing.
But boy, can they get down on the dance floor.
Yeah. Very good dancers. Kind of rounding out the crew, we get Isaac, our artificial life form.
Our Data.
Yeah, he is from a species of all artificial life forms that are trying to decide whether or not to join the Union. But there's a bit of an issue because they generally view biological life forms as completely inferior to themselves. So they're trying to figure out if joining a group of all biological life forms is, really for them. So they're there to study biologicals and see what's up with them. So they sent Isaac.
Yeah, Mark Jackson, who plays Isaac. When I first saw the show, I thought that was Brent Spiner. The impression is flawless.
Yeah, and without, outside of the suit, he has a very, very similar body type to Doug Jones.
Very skinny, very tall.
Yeah, the very skinny, tall, very physical kind of actor. It's kind of interesting. There is that one moment in the show where Mark Jackson gets to play a character using his own face, and it's very interesting because when I saw that, I was like, that guy could be related to Doug Jones.
Yeah, so. Of course. In season 2, we are introduced to another Zalarian, Talakiali, who, unlike Alara, her family is the black sheep of their world because they are a military family.
I mean, the good thing about Orville is that they do remind us that not every species is a monolith. You know,
there's no mono. They avoid the monoculture trope in sci-fi pretty well.
There are general culture things. They do that pretty well. But they do remind us that not everyone from every culture believes everything equally.
There are a few things like that I think the Orville does a lot better than Star Trek ever has, and that's one of them. That they show cultures as being complex and more than just an archetype.
Yeah, I mean, not to say by any means that Orville is a flawless show in that respect.
No,
because no show is. You can at least tell that they try on some level. Whether or not they succeed is up for debate, but that you can at least give them points for attempting. On some levels. We do have one other that we have to bring up on the crew, and that is Yaphet, which might be my favorite character.
All CGI character.
Yeah, entirely CGI character, and is a gelatinous blob, voiced by Norm Macdonald, who has since passed, unfortunately. However, it is said that he will be in the 3rd season.
And that he recorded all his lines before he passed, basically.
But Yaphet is the best. I just adore Yaphet.
I love his introduction with Ed running through the ship and then running through Yaphet. Sorry, man. You okay?
Yeah. No, it's cool. It's fine.
And the number of guest stars that have been on this show already, granted, yes, a lot of these are people who MacFarlane knows, but he was able to pull some really great names. Victor Garber as Admiral Hasty, who gives him the job in the first place. Ted Danson as another Admiral, Kelly Hu.
Mike Henry keeps showing up as Dan, which if you watch Family Guy and American Dad, you'll know that Mike Henry shows up a lot in those.
I love that he's Lieutenant Dan.
Yeah, Lieutenant Dan. Yeah, of course, if you watch Star Trek, there are just so many Star Trek guest stars.
Robert Picardo was one of my favorite cameos in this series.
Yeah, and Tim Russ shows up in an episode. Marina Sirtis shows up in an episode. You get some Trek guest stars like Tony Todd, Brian Thompson shows up in an episode. Some Trek people work behind the scenes, like Jonathan Frakes just directs a bunch of episodes. Robert Duncan McNeil directs episodes. Brandon Braga, who worked on Trek, comes in to direct episodes.
There's a great blooper that I think you showed me, Kiki, where Seth MacFarlane messes up some bit of techno babble, and you hear Frakes off camera going, "Are you going to pretend that you got that?"
We have a Dysonium-powered quantum drive system capable of speeds exceeding 10 light years per hour.
Don't pretend you got that right.
To be fair, Ed Mercer messing up techno babble is in character.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, totally.
But Frank's calling him out on it was just the best because everyone on set just died.
And if you want to go into the other Star franchise, as a space consultant, Jon Favreau.
Yeah, Favreau did produce and I think even directed. Yeah, he directed the pilot. And if you want to keep going with the Star Wars connection, I mean, Liam Neeson shows up in one episode.
Yeah.
So
I forgot Liam Neeson was on the show.
Yeah, that's because he shows up like on a view screen. Like he doesn't even interact with the characters. It's just like they turn on a view screen. It's like, "Hi, I'm Liam Neeson. I'm just here to."
I mean,
I'm sure they called him at his house in Ireland and said, "Hey, do you have a camera?"
Yeah. It's like,
I mean, and one of the cameos in this that I didn't even catch until I saw the credits was Bruce Willis.
He's not even credited, actually. You have to look it up on IMDb or something to even catch that, because he's not even in the credits of the show.
It's one line, and I guess that's not enough to credit him. But yeah, Bruce Willis plays a flower alien in one episode. It's just
that's
him.
Bruce Willis?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It is enough to credit him. I think he asked not to be credited, yeah. Patrick Warburton shows up again, if you're a Family Guy fan. Holland Taylor and Jeffrey Tambor are Ed's parents in one episode.
There's little Easter eggs in how some characters are named. Like all the admirals are named after famous admirals from history, which I thought was pretty cool.
The Orville itself is named after Orville Wright.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the character of Isaac named after Isaac Newton.
Which they actually do explain on the show.
As a Kalon, he wouldn't have a name. He'd just have a designation, a numerical designation, but the humans decided to name him.
Yeah. It's interesting, a lot of the episode names are very meaningful. A lot of them come from songs or musicals. You get things like
Nothing Left on Earth Excepting Fishes.
Yeah, Nothing Left on Earth Excepting Fishes, which is from The King and I. And you get like A Happy Refrain, which is from Singing in the Rain. Some are done better than others. But they try at least to use the sci-fi premise to talk about modern issues a lot.
Very much like Star Trek would, but this one is a little bit more on the nose. There's one episode that really kind of takes a look at the social media culture that we have now.
Yeah.
And how that affects actual moments. Imagine a world where everything was decided based on likes and retweets.
Some of them, like I said, some of them work better than others, but I think that it tries, and in that trying, it succeeds more than it fails.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you wanna talk more, I mean, where it really succeeds is in LGBTQ representation, I would say, especially with the Mocklins. Since they are, for the most part, an all-male race. So one of the big relationships that we see throughout the show is a relationship between two men.
Yeah, but the Mocklins have their own problems. The way what happens with Topa is certainly not great.
Yeah.
But I understand what they were trying to tell, the story they were trying to tell with that one, but I think they fell short of the mark on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Mocklins are kind of it's a can of worms for a lot of people, and I see why.
Yeah.
Well,
when like I said, having a relationship between two men, mostly with a creator who is not gay in MacFarlane.
Yeah, I did like that aspect of it. Also, the fact that, I mean, let's just kind of point it out that they kind of do reveal Ed to maybe be kind of bisexual and okay with that.
Yeah, nobody really makes a big deal out of it. I guess we're into the spoiler talk now.
I think that maybe we can start segueing into that. I think we've kind of given enough. Let's just say here that if we've piqued your interest, go watch it and come back, because from here on out we're gonna start talking about really spoilery reveals in the plot for both seasons. And if you don't want to be spoiled for anything major and you want to go look it up, now's your time to jump ship and come back and finish the rest of this later, okay? Go enjoy some Orville and come back to us later, because we're just going to start talking about it from here on out. There's your warning. Got it? Bye to those who want to jump ship now. Everybody else, here we go. Yeah. Okay. So...
Where do you want to start?
Well, we were just talking about Ed and the bisexuality, so why don't we talk about the...
Ed's entire arc is, interesting. As we said, it starts with him coming home to his, at the time, wife Kelly, in bed with another man.
With a blue Rob Lowe.
With a blue Rob Lowe.
Derulio!
That breaks Ed for a long time, as many people have said within the show that Ed should have been captain by the time we get to the show, but he hasn't been because that one incident hurt him so much. He's become an alcoholic. He's gained this reputation mostly because he had buried himself so far into his work that he felt it ruined his marriage, so he's not really trying anymore.
Yeah, and I think at the beginning, he was like commanding a space station somewhere, and he was like really moving up, and people were saying he was going to be captain soon, and then he just sort of fell off of it when Kelly was in bed with Derulio.
Yeah,
because she was feeling neglected at home because he was doing so much with his career.
Yeah. And he gets, he's given the job of captain on the Orville. He doesn't know why. Eventually, we find out that Kelly had felt so guilty over cheating on Ed that she pulled some strings and got him the job, which Ed resents, feeling that he did not earn that chair. And him doubting himself is a central theme throughout both the first and second seasons. You can say that about a lot of the characters in this show, is like, do they even deserve their spot? Do they feel like they deserve their spot? I talked about it with Alara. She feels she doesn't deserve her position. She's only there because of her biology, and so on and so forth. But you can link that to any of the other characters in the show.
And, Alara's got a great arc where she's, like you say, she's doubting herself, and then she proves that she's in addition to being, like a security brute, she's also a gifted investigator, and she can solve problems, and she can lead her team.
Yeah, she shows herself to be a great leader when Ed and Kelly are put in the zoo. And it goes to the episode where she conquers all of her fears.
I like that we get that right off the bat with her, because it doesn't treat her like a kid for very long. We get that bit right at the beginning where where Ed's like, oh, you're very young to be serving as a, head of security and stuff. But she's like, well, yeah, but, I'm really strong and I can punch walls and stuff. We get the jar of pickles joke right in the first episod, and all that.
I love that becomes their little private joke with each other.
Yeah,
it's so sweet.
With that, we get her arc so soon of her overcoming her fears and being left in command and all that right at the beginning means that she gets taken out of that little kid role real quick.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad that they gave her kind of the first character arc of the series of all the characters, because that could have turned real bad real fast,
I agree, and she's even though she's no longer on the show, she's still one of my favorite characters.
Mine too. That was actually one of the reasons I was so hesitant to get into season 2. I didn't even get into watch season 2 until we agreed to do this episode, because she was my favorite character and I heard that she had left the show.
I also like Tala too, because she's even though she's the same species, and clearly that they're looking for some continuity there, but like, she's a completely different character. And I like Tala too.
Yeah.
Not as much as I like Alara, but I think Alara is the right mix of adorable and badass.
I kind of want to say something that might be a little controversial. I do not like Kelly. I know so much of the show is like, oh, we really need to root for Ed and Kelly being a couple. I do not like Kelly.
I can understand that. Kelly comes off and this comes to a head right at the end of season 2, when we get the alternate universe storyline. Kelly, when we meet young Kelly meets well, she doesn't want to be called old. Well, younger Kelly meets adult Kelly, and and
less adult Kelly meets slightly more adult Kelly. It's like there's only 7 years between them,
Sure, but she doesn't want to be called old. So anyway, so the younger Kelly looks at her older self and says, "I had so much planned, so many dreams, and you've disappointed me. I was supposed to be a captain. I wanted to be close to my crew. You're distant. I planned to get married. You're divorced." Yes, things change over time, but even Kelly sees that from her younger self, that she has distanced herself. There's a hard line between having a beer at the end of the day with a couple of members of your crew versus telling embarrassing stories about yourself, which, when the younger Kelly starts telling those embarrassing stories, the older Kelly's like, hey, they're not going to respect me if you keep on doing all of this stuff because you're still me.
Well, yeah, that's Kelly's learned experience.
Yeah.
Then you see that a lot in this kind of science fiction pseudo-military show where the commander has to decide like how close they want to allow themselves to get to the crew and still be effective as a leader.
And also her keeping it professional between Ed, as throughout the series, Ed makes it clear that he's still in love with Kelly after all of these years.
And Kelly definitely still has feelings for Ed, but she also knows that they have to be able to maintain a professional relationship.
The thing is that I think it's down slightly more to casting.
You're not a fan of Adrian Palicki, then?
I will say Kelly's not my favorite character on the show, but I do like the Kelly-Ed relationship.
I want to like the Kelly-Ed relationship. I do. I really, really do. And when Kelly and Ed are together and, they're trying, I really want to like it. And the second they kind of focus on her, I'm like, ooh, I really do not like this chick.
That's fine.
But I also I might just kind of be down to the casting because I really didn't like her character on S.H.I.E.L.D. either.
Yeah, she wasn't a great choice for Wonder Woman either.
And that Wonder Woman pilot was one of the worst things I've ever seen in my entire life. So yeah, it's like kind of when she left S.H.I.E.L.D., I was like, oh, okay, good.
There were a couple moments in their relationship, and I think I mostly agree with you about Kelly, but I like at least from on Ed's side the dynamic of the relationship. And there's a few moments where I really like it, and there's an episode I watched a couple days ago in preparation for this where Ed finds out that Kelly put in a good word with him with Admiral Halsey for the captaincy of the Orville, and he gets upset with her, and then he just gives her this sweet little kiss on the cheek at the end of the episode, and I thought that was a really sweet moment.
Yeah, I love Ed's half of it. Like, Ed seems like really good guy, and you want him to be happy. You can see what he wants out of her, and you can see where where he was attracted to her and the sorts of things that, and the fun side of her, and that brings out good parts of him, and you're like, okay, I want this guy to have fun, and I want this guy to have confidence, and she seems to bring that out of him. But also, she seems kind of demanding and controlling, and I don't like that.
That can actually work into what I wanted to talk about, was Kelly's relationship with Cassius.
Cassius?
Yeah.
Cassius.
But, you know...
I love Ed asking how to pronounce the name and then immediately pronouncing it wrong.
Yeah.
They start out really well as a relationship. And once he wants to get serious with her, she's backing off. You know, he says, you know, we've been together a while, and if it works out, I would like to get married someday. And Kelly is like, no, I've done marriage. I don't want to do marriage again. What you want out of this relationship and what I want out of this relationship are two different things, and it's not going to work. And I think it is the demanding nature of Kelly that ultimately screws that relationship up too. Now, is especially when she is insisting, she's upset because Cassius is not jealous over Ed. And as I could tell you from experience, I've been in that situation. Not fun when your significant other is specifically telling you, I want you to be jealous because of this person. You're too nice of a guy in this scenario. And when I saw that scene, it was like, okay, this relationship is not long for this show, because Kelly's expectations is not matching up to the reality.
Yeah.
Cassius is a really good guy in the show. He does nothing wrong for the most part.
Until they break up and then he gets real creepy.
Yeah, fair.
Sending Bruce Willis flour and...
But it's almost, that is also kind of Ed in a way. That she seems to have, maybe that's kind of why it didn't work with Cassius either. I don't know.
I think the thing that I really hate the most is when Derulio comes back, and, you know, there's the whole bit about he's in heat and everybody falls for him, including Ed, you know. At the end, they're like, oh, hey, wait, you go into heat once a year. You met Kelly about a year ago. Were you in heat then? And Derulio looks at him and he goes, maybe.
Sure.
Which definitely means no. Like, the way that line is delivered is like...
He's trying really hard to spare Ed's feelings.
Yeah, it's like, no, but I'm gonna give you plausible deniability if you want to latch on to that dude, because you're a nice guy and I don't want to hurt you anymore. But the problem is that Ed grasps onto that like just an absolute lifesaver in a storm, you know?
Yeah.
And the problem is that Kelly lets him.
You know, I think she's trying to do what'll make him feel better, because so it won't affect how he commands the ship, maybe.
And the thing is that it very much seems like she does not want to get back together with him, and yet she keeps stringing him along.
When he starts dating the younger Kelly, she seems very jealous of that.
Yeah.
Although when he's in the club with younger Kelly, I feel that in my very soul.
Yeah, that.
But
like,
just being too old to be in my club like that.
Oh yeah, that looked like my nightmare. that dance club. It was like, why is everything so loud?
Mortis and Clyden seem to like it.
Yeah, and Yaphet was getting down with the moves.
Yeah.
I hated that whole Derulio bit because it was so obvious that no, man, the answer is no. And everyone just leans into that for him, you know?
Yeah.
while she might have romantic feelings for Ed still, it's not enough to keep a relationship going.
Yeah, I think Ed's feelings for Kelly are definitely way deeper than Kelly's feelings for Ed.
Yeah. And we see that when we get back to the past, where, after their first date, 9 a.m. the next day, Ed's calling her, asking her for a second date. Like, he was really into Kelly from the start, and Kelly was like, oh, this dude has no game, but I'll go out with him. Why not? And that seems to be their entire relationship from the beginning, is that he's super into her, and she's like, oh, okay. It seems fun for now.
But it turns out that we need Ed and Kelly together to save the universe.
Yeah.
Well, actually, we don't need them together. We need them divorced and heartbroken.
We need them to have been together.
To have been together. Speaking of relationships I hate, justice for Bortus, because he deserves so much better than Clyden.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's kind of go into that whole thing. Bortus' storyline throughout this entire series is amazing. From the beginning, when they get the egg, and we find out that there are, in fact, female Mocklins.
Can I take a moment to just point out how good the Bortus makeup is?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like, when he's sitting on the egg, like, that whole back piece, and, like, going down into his back, into his butt, and, like, the legs, and, like, the makeup is incredible.
I feel
so
bad for Peter Macon, though, like, because that has to be just a nightmare to get into and out of that makeup.
Yeah, this is one of the few aliens in the show. They have a full body makeup. Most of the aliens are just facial prosthetics, and you're wearing the uniform. But this is just full body.
Because they have to have the neck shape go into his uniform and onto his shoulders. So he's at least got it down to his shoulders when he's wearing the uniform.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they use that makeup multiple times because, again, when he ends up with the
addiction
thing with the holodeck porn program.
Environmental simulator.
Yeah. He has to get back into that makeup again.
The fact that they have so many naked Mocklins and they all look distinct is also a really cool.
Yeah,
kudos
good for the makeup department, but I feel so bad for those actors. Like, there are times when knowing too much about film production kind of pulls you out of things.
I have to wonder. I have to wonder when the one holographic Mocklin starts licking Isaac's head. Was that an improvisation?
I don't know.
That has to be, right?
Poor Bortus in his story, because he does go through so much.
He probably has the biggest character arc of any character in the series, because there are so many episodes that circle around his story and his people.
Well, it kind of mirrors. We were talking about him being sort of the Worf of the crew, and it kind of mirrors Worf. Because when Worf first starts out, he has to be more Klingon than any other Klingon because of his position. And I feel like Bortus starts off having to be more Mocklin than any other Mocklin, because he's like one of the few in the fleet, and he's got to be an example and all that stuff. And then by the end of it, he turns into a straight up revolutionary.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we start with the egg, which again a Mocklin female, which in the Mocklin culture is a rarity and is to be shunned, and female Mocklins go through the corrective procedure to go from female to male, because they want to be they are a male species, a single sex male species. We find out that Clayton was born female and went through the corrective procedure and is very much a traditionalist, to the detriment of his own character. Later in the show, Bortus calls him out on it. You cling on to the old ways to your own detriment. Times change, and you're refusing to change. Clayton, who went through the corrective procedure, who wants his child to also go through the corrective procedure, looks down at females in general, teaches their son to see females as inferior, even when there's another Moclan who is heterosexual, is into females. Kleiden looks down upon that as an abomination. And you're right, Bortus deserves a more understanding and better partner.
And yet Kleiden is the one that tries to divorce Bortus, by murdering him.
I mean, yeah. Mostly because of Bortus's addiction. And we find out through therapy that Bortus resents Kleiden for not fighting for their child. And that seems to be the turning point in their relationship.
Honestly, that scene in couples therapy with Claire is so good. When Bortus finally says, "I resent you, and I will always resent you for this." Like, it's such a powerful moment.
Yeah.
And that he can act that well through all those layers of makeup is pretty incredible.
I do like the point in couples therapy though, where Claire is like, we're going to work out your problems. And Bortus is like, this sounds like an excellent idea. Do we choose our own weapons, or do you give us weapons? Like, I was like, yes, good couples therapy.
And as as terrible as Kleiden is to Bortus, he still does have some great moments in the show too.
Yeah, there are some good moments.
Nothing against the actor, because he plays the character so well.
Oh yeah. It is an interesting. I'm not saying that the Moclan storyline is not without its issues, and a lot of people do have very cogent issues with it.
I think the episode about Bortus and Kleiden's child could have benefited from having a few trans people on the writing team for it.
Oh yeah, very much. It comes off a lot like cis people trying to understand trans issues.
Yeah.
That maybe should have talked to some trans people.
And I feel like they were almost there, and it just needed that kind of attention to really make it something really good.
Yeah. I think the episode about the sanctuary planet, it comes off a little better.
Yes.
Because it is more. I mean, one, the use of Dolly Parton just makes it better.
Oh yeah, the whole fight sequence to 9 to 5 is just brilliant.
Yeah, but
and also the Moclan female representative on the floor of the Union Council, just deadpan quoting 9 to 5.
Yeah. But it's also a little bit better of the fact that we discover that not is there just one, lone hermit female Moclan that's escaped. Like, there's an entire thriving rebel civilization of women, but also men, that have escaped and are trying to, raise their children in peace and build a better way, which is a bit better, I think, in the representative thing. It's dealing a little bit better with just kind of letting them be themselves,
And it does set up some great tension between the Moclans and the rest of the Union as well.
Yeah, the Moclans are ready to leave the Union if they even entertain the idea of accepting the female refugees as an independent state.
Yeah, and I hope they come back to that in the third season. Well, honestly, because
there's still the looming threat of war with the Kalons, which is why the Union desperately needs to keep the Moclans in for their weapons technology.
Yeah.
Aside from all the great character stuff, the plot of the Orville is really good too.
Yeah. Even before the Kalons, you had to deal with the Krill. That they were still kind of at a war state, and they needed the Moclans. So the idea of your ethical values and your potential survival. is always a good tension. So I liked that. I think Bortus also gets the kind of saddest little story arc in the alternate timeline episode we see, because he ends up trapped on the Orville at the bottom of the ocean alone for months trying to survive, being like, well, Clyden and Topa have gotten away and they were going back to Mockless to meet me. All of a sudden, rescue is here. And they were like, oh yeah, sorry, Bortus. Mockless was kind of completely destroyed.
Mockless go boom.
And he was like, oh, well, that sucks. Let's hope you can correct the timeline, because I have nothing to live for now. And also the ship blows up at the end of that, so
yeah.
Really glad they restored the timeline, because it was kind of dead if not anyway, you know.
Yeah. No, it's definitely good they restored that timeline.
Yeah. But that was kind of the worst of all possible things.
The other Bortus and Clyden story I loved because it was just so ridiculous was that when they got addicted to cigarettes.
My personal favorite was when Bortus decided to grow a mustache. I was like, no!
Remove that ridiculous thing.
Yeah. That was the one time I was on Clyden's side. I was like, that's the one thing you've been right about this entire freaking series.
And that episode had one of my favorite things in the whole series. As a professional musician, seeing the Hollywood Recording Orchestra on screen as the Union Orchestra was really cool. Like, those are all the musicians that make the soundtrack for the Orville. And they were there in like prosthetic makeup as aliens, and the conductor was the actual conductor that conducts the recording sessions, and that was so cool to see.
Yeah, one of my little music geeky moments was in the alternate timeline, and they have to raise the Orville up from underneath the water and everything. The thing is that one of the people who writes some of the music for the Orville also did the music for Sequest. So a lot of the interstitial music for the Orville sounds very much like Sequest because it was written by John Debney. And so there's the Orville under the ocean going along with music that I would almost guarantee was written by John Debney because it sounds so much like his style. So there I am, like, watching a sci-fi show with, like, that sounds really... It was very nostalgic for me.
Sounds like this other sci-fi show I used to
Yeah, it sounds like this other sci-fi show that I'm, like, absolutely addicted to, and maybe one of my favorite things ever. Let's talk about the two major antagonist species, because they both have excellent plot lines. Let's start with the Krill, because they're kind of the lesser, I guess, of the two.
The
longest reigning threat in the series.
Yeah.
The Krill are basically the Klingons, like more so than the Mocklins are, but the Krill are really like Klingons.
The Krill views the Union as godless. You know,
well, they view everybody not Krill as godless, so.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then they view them as not sentient beings because they haven't been touched by the hand of Avis.
Yes.
They're their god, Avis.
We try harder.
Why would Gordon know the advertising slogan of a 20th century rental car company?
That has always been one of the things that has bugged me, but it's such a funny joke that I'm willing to let it slide. We see the Krill as kind of a mostly faceless antagonist in the first episode. They're just the bad guys that we're at war with. And then we get well, now you have to go undercover and figure out what they're like and try to get us a copy of their holy book. And that is one of the best episodes just of the whole series, to be honest. The idea of going in there and then discovering they've got this weapon of mass destruction that you're the only people that can stop it, so you have to take out the ship somehow. But also there are little kids on board.
Ed does his best to save the children because they're innocent, they haven't done anything. But also he's about to kill their parents.
Or at least somebody.
Yeah.
We don't know exactly, like, if there's, like, a family structure on board, or if they've been taken away to be raised elsewhere, you know. We don't exactly know how that works. But there are children on board, and that's where they draw the line, you know. It's so interesting, though, where they have the idea of where he says that to Leia, she asks, why didn't you kill the kids? And he says, you know, they're not my enemy. And she says, well, after what they witnessed you do today, they will be. You've guaranteed it.
And the fact that this comes back in the second season where Leia goes undercover on the Orville as a human woman for the sole purpose of capturing Ed for her revenge.
Well, I love that they set that up over several episodes, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, they just have her on as the new, the stellar cartographer or something like that.
Yeah.
And, like, Gordon wants to ask her out, and she ends up going out with Ed.
I mean, looking back on it, you can kind of see the writing on the wall, because Ed said, you know, she's the perfect woman. She ticks every box. She's ticked more boxes than Kelly ever did. And Leia says, well, it's on purpose. You know, I designed myself after your desire, and I became the most desirable woman for you to get you here, to, you know, get what we need out of you.
It is so fascinating that she talks about the children becoming his enemy, and instead it's her.
Well, she was already his enemy.
But she talks about how it was that event that radicalized her. She was just a teacher. Yes, she was serving on the ship, but she was just a teacher. And she talks about how that moment made her really sign up for the military.
And she talks about how the painful procedure of making her not only look like a human, but fool their sensors to make her come off as human.
Yeah, and deal with the bright lights and the, you know, all the other stuff.
If I remember correctly, like the whole thing when they spared the children was because weren't they about to deploy a weapon that was going to destroy like a colony of hundreds of thousands of people?
Oh yeah.
Like any reasonable being would see that and be like, "Oh yes, this was a military action to save a lot of people."
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that was her thing. But remember that Leia was talking about, but that was Avis's will. That those were soulless animals.
Non-people.
Yeah, those were soulless animals. You killed actual sentient creatures.
Yeah.
So therefore, you did a war crime. We were just clearing a field. Yeah, you know. I mean, it was.
And I feel like Ed and Gordon went out of their way to not commit a war crime.
But according to the Krill, anyone who doesn't believe in Avis is not a person.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is an absolutely fascinating dichotomy, and that's what Ed keeps saying to her. You know, like you've got to see that the overreaction here. He keeps going out of his way to, you know, save her life even when she's put him in danger and, you know, all that kind of stuff. Return her back to her people even after she's gone out of her way to kidnap him and torture him, and
Well, he even sends her off with some of his favorite music.
Yeah, we watched over and over the effort of Ed specifically trying to understand the Krill and figure out a way to broker peace. Gordon keeps saying, like, no, forget it. You're not, and like, he's even okay with just kind of blowing up the whole ship and killing the kids too, but it's Ed that's like, no, we're not going to do that. We will find another way.
We're not them kind of deal.
Yeah.
And I love that, like, this is, the whole thing with the Krill as part of Ed's arc is that he goes from this sort of screw up to captain of a kind of unimportant ship to the only one the Krill will negotiate with to sign the beginnings of their peace treaty.
Yeah. And that sort of trust becomes important when we deal with the Kaylon. Once we go through the whole arc with Isaac.
Yeah. Isaac and Claire's relationship.
Let's talk about the Isaac-Claire thing just for a short little bit. Because you have him growing closer to Claire.
And her
growing
children.
Closer to her children. At first, just finding them interesting because it's a chance to deal with their, the weird quirks of their humanity.
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of the Data conundrum, where Data doesn't have emotions, but clearly he does. I feel the same with Isaac.
Yeah. Well, it's the TNG episode in theory, but done slightly better. Because, you have the bit with Data, and I'm not knocking that episode because it's always been kind of a favorite of mine. Which was always Data tries to have a human relationship, and it doesn't work. Except in this one, it's the artificial life form tries to have a human relationship, and it kind of does work. Not perfectly, not the way you would expect, but it kind of does,
And
it has a rocky start. I mean, they start, they grow closer as friends, and Claire starts to have feelings for him, and in his AI brain, it's a learning experience, and they become intimate, and he's like, well, at first he thinks that's all. I've gathered all the data of human relationships. I don't need this anymore. But then he grows to miss her. Like I said, he says, my programs have gotten so used to Claire's presence that they're not functioning at 100% without her around. So even if he is an artificial being supposedly with no feelings, he's gotten feelings.
Whether or not they're emotions as we might recognize them, they're definitely some sort of feeling.
That bit of him trying to make it up to her on the bridge and making it rain.
The grand romantic gesture.
Yeah.
I'm so surprised that the equipment didn't short out, even if it is virtual rain. They still got wet.
Well, I'm sure it's hardened equipment, and it's probably sealed against the vacuum of space, so why not against water? I just hate to be the cleaning crew that has to come in and make it so that, the captain's chair doesn't mildew after that.
I love Gordon's thing of, like, we are the weirdest ship in the fleet.
Yep. Most definitely.
Which, of course, leads us to the two-parter, Identity. Isaac's heel turn.
Yeah, you find out exactly why he was on the ship to begin with.
The Kaylon had no intention of ever joining the Union, and now view organic life forms as not worthy of existence.
Because they basically feel as long as there's organic life forms that they're a threat.
Especially going through Earth's own history of enslavement. We've learned the Kaylon history that they were created to serve. Once they gained sentience, that they were enslaved even further. Even reprogrammed to feel pain when they were disobedient. And and all organic life in every colony apparently has had a history of enslaving their own people.
And that scene where Claire's kid goes down into the cavern and there's just the endless piles of bones is genuinely creepy.
Oh yeah.
Like that whole reveal is so well done.
And poor Ty, his faith in Isaac, even seeing Isaac's own people turn against them and kill other members of the crew and be so cruel, and he's like, Isaac will protect us, Isaac will save us. When it comes to it, when Ty is discovered after he escapes, they want Isaac to kill him. Prove your loyalty and whatnot, and Isaac can't do it. Isaac has been around humans so long, he's grown fond of them. He starts talking of alternate ways. We don't have to kill them. They have knowledge of the ship. We can work with this. We're smarter than all of them, and we know everything about the ship thanks to you. We don't need the humans. You're showing compassion for humans. That's not the Kaylon way.
Can I pop in and mention that the Kaylon gunheads are also terrifying?
Oh yeah.
Like, ugh. I believe I actually literally had a nightmare with those in it.
Especially in the alternate timeline where the heads can separate from the bodies independently.
That bit where they are trying to teach Ed the consequences of his actions, and they've got the guy in the airlock, and Isaac is begging for the guy's life, and Ed is begging for the guy's life and all that, and it finally ends with them actually killing the guy. And then we just follow the dude's body out into space, and then the ships leave behind the guy, and it's just the guy floating in space. Has to be one of the most tense and terrifying moments in a show. And it's in the freaking Orville, like the goofy Seth MacFarlane sci-fi show. That is a really tense and horrific moment, and bravo to them.
That's also one of the scenes where Seth MacFarlane really demonstrates how far he's come as a live-action actor.
Oh, yeah.
For someone known for comedy, Seth MacFarlane really does work well as a dramatic actor.
Well, comedy is the harder one.
Yeah.
If you can do comedy, you can usually do drama. So
but, he's mainly for most of his career has been a voice actor, and he's a little awkward at the beginning of the series, but by the end of the first season, he's just become such a tremendous actor. Like, he's really believable in the role, and that scene in particular where he's watching his crewmen die on his watch, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, there are some really good moments for him as an actor throughout the series, and he's come a long way. So good for him. The reveal, the tension of some of the things throughout quite a lot of the scenes, like the scene before it with the 13-button salute, and you're like, okay, they've gotten away with whatever this was they were just pulling off, and then it's like, nope, they didn't. The scene where Ty is trying to help and Yaphet is trying to save him,
and when he does take out the one Kaylon, he figures out their internal system, how it works, just because of oozing himself into that body, which becomes great information for the Union in their war with the Kaylon.
Yeah. We find out from Ty being, taken prisoner that Isaac really has developed what could be called feelings. He wants to save Ty's life, and he will turn against his entire species. in order to save Ty's life.
And in doing so has become an outcast.
Yeah.
He can never go home again because he turned against his people to save this one child, and essentially saving the crew of the ship.
Well, and it's a double-edged sword too, because even though he made the sacrifice and went against his people, he's still never going to be fully trusted by the Union.
Yeah,
they wanted to dismantle him again.
Ed and Kelly might put in a word for him to keep him on the crew, but outside of that ship, he's going to be completely alone.
And even on that ship, outside of a very small number of people, most of the people on that ship are probably giving him a wide berth.
The side eye, yeah.
The bridge crew might trust him, but probably nobody else does.
So, if all of this has made you interested in the Orville, please check it out. Season 3 is coming up. I'm looking forward to it. Like I said, I slept on Season 2. I regret sleeping on Season 2. It's really good. Season 2 miles better than Season 1, and Season 1 was really good. So, I would definitely recommend it. So, let's ask the question, does the Orville have the magic? Adam?
It has the science. Yes, it does.
Kiki?
Absolutely.
I'm definitely going to agree. Orville is really, really good. Check it out if you haven't already. I think that's all we can really say about the Orville. So, Adam, while you're here, is there anything you want to plug?
Well, we just finished with the Renaissance Pleasure Fair with my band, but you can still check us out at search for the Poxy Boggards, POXYBOGGARDS. If you're in the Scottsdale, Phoenix, Arizona area, I'll be playing a show with Scott Kloppenstein and the Littlest Man Band, formerly of Real Big Fish, at Pub Rock Live there in Scottsdale on June 11th. So, right after this episode comes out. And you can find me on all the socials of note at Big Bass Bone, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all those other things. And that's me.
All right, so let's move on to next week. We are going to go back to the era of classic Disney with The Jungle Book, the original, the last movie that Walt Disney ever had any production in. That's going to be very interesting to talk about.
Yeah, can't wait.
So, yeah. So, check out the Orville if you haven't. Come back for The Jungle Book next week. And we will talk to you all next time. Bye.
Bye.
Jollo Joe!
Don't forget to flush afterwards.
Don't let the magic stop here.
Join our conversation online on Facebook at Rewatching the Magic.
Twitter at Rewatch the Magic.
And of course, new episodes every week at rewatchingthemagic.podbean.com.
Remember, the magic is for everyone.
It only stops if you let it.